I'm Julie Holland.
And I'm Nick Spacek.
We're the hosts of The Carnage Report, a horror news podcast, part of the Cinepunks Podcast Network.
Every other Thursday, we bring you the latest news you can use on horror movies, casting, production, re-releases, trailers, and more.
We also do a deep dive into a movie new to streaming or theaters, giving you our thoughts and opinions on whether you should check it out.
Toss in recommendations for similar movies and a whole lot of commentary, and it's all the horror news you can use.
The Carnage Report is on Twitter and Instagram at Report Carnage.
Find us at cinepunks.com, that's CINEPUNX, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Howdy, folks. My name is Owen Brand.
And I'm Katie Cadaver.
And we are co-hosts of the VHS Vault podcast, where old is new and cringe is king. We are a podcast dedicated to bringing you old and obscure movies from deep in the vault.
That's right. You can listen to us on Spotify, Amazon Music, and on Planet Rage Radio Thursdays at 8 p.m. Central on the Live 365 app. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.
And email us at vhsvaultpodcast@gmail.com.
The Shameless Picture Show is part of the Cinepunks Network. If you like the Shameless Picture Show and you want to hear other great shows like it, make sure you check out the Cinepunks Network. You can find them at www.cinepunks.com. That's CINEPUNX. There's other great shows such as Cinepunks. There's The Carnage Report, Cinema Smorgasbord, Fat Girl Hacks, Loud, Fast, Philly, Tomb of Ideas, and Twitch of the Death Nerve, and so much more. If you like punk rock and you like movies, make sure to go to www.cinepunks.com. And let's not forget the sponsors for the Cinepunks Network. We have the Lehigh Valley Apparel Creations. They are the premier screen printer of the Lehigh Valley with service to the whole country, professional and personable in a way that only a DIY business can be. They also have ridiculously low prices for whatever your screen printing needs may be. You can visit them online at xlvacx.com. That's xlvacx.com. Lehigh Valley Apparel Creations. We also have the Essex Coffee Roasters. All their coffee is roasted to order. They have high quality beans, bunch of apparel, and tea available. They are bringing high quality coffee to the masses without the pretentiousness. Use the code CINEPUNKS for 10% off your first order. You can visit them at www.essexcoffeeroasters.com. That's ESSEX, coffeeroasters.com. Once again, use the code CINEPUNKS for 10% off your first order. One of our newer sponsors here at the Shameless Picture Show is Kino Lorber. With a library of over 4,000 titles, Kino Lorber Incorporated has been a leader in independent art house distribution for 35 years, including 30 films per year theatrically under its Kino Lorber, Kino Repertory, and Alive Mind Cinema banners, garnering 7 Academy Award nominations in 9 years. In addition, the company brings over 350 titles yearly to the home entertainment and educational markets through physical and digital media releases. With the expanding family of distributed labels, Kino Lorber handles releases in ancillary media for Zeitgeist Films, Milestone Films, Cohen Media Group, Greenwich Entertainment, Artsploitation, Palisades Tartan, Raro Video, and others, placing physical titles through all wholesale, retail, and direct-to-consumer channels, as well as direct digital distribution through over 40 OTT services, including all major TVOD and SVOD platforms. If you'd like more information on Kino Lorber and all the great titles they're putting out, be sure to check them out at www.kinolorber.com. That's KINOLORBER.com. KinoLorber.com.
Warning! This movie podcast actually discusses movies. Be aware that it may discuss any of the following elements: endings, surprise twists, unexpected cameos, and all manner of spoilers. If this doesn't appeal to you, why listen to a movie podcast? Without further ado, please enjoy our feature presentation, The Shameless Picture Show.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Shameless Picture Show. I am your host, Michael Viers, and today I am being joined by a very special guest, Robert Tinnell. Did I pronounce that correctly?
It's both ways. Nobody really knows for sure what the right way is. So yeah, you're good.
All right, well, I'll go Tinnell. Robert Tinnell's passion for filmmaking and storytelling has propelled him beyond his work on feature films, including Feast of the Seven Fishes and Kids of the Round Table, to commercials that made the cover of Adweek, long and short form documentaries, and MTV award-winning music videos he produced for the likes of David Fincher, including Straight Up for Paula Abdul. As a feature film director, Tinnell has consistently attracted a talented cast of projects, among them Burt Reynolds, Joe Mantegna. I can never pronounce his last name correctly. Joe Pantoliano, Skylar Gisondo, Malcolm McDowell, Ben Gazzara, Luis Fletcher, and Paul Ben Victor. He had a strong track record of casting future stars in early roles such as Ryan Gosling, Alicia Cuthbert, Andrew Schultz, and Jessica Darrow. In his most recent project is a concert film for Charles Wesley Godwin. As a producer, Tinnell's credits began shortly out of film school, producing more than 80. Producing more than one 80s low-budget cult classic film, and continuing up to more recent films, including A Rose for Her Grave and 12 Desperate Hours for Lifetime, which was filmed in North Central West Virginia. When he's not writing or shooting, Tinnell spends his time with his wife and children, working on permaculture and forest farming projects, as well as conducting large-scale habitat restoration on his mountain farm in Appalachia. So, do you currently live in the Appalachia, if you don't mind me asking?
When my wife and I found ourselves expecting our first child, I actually slipped out of LA. Nobody really noticed, and I came back to West Virginia. I wanted to raise my kids, where I had family support and. Mm-hmm. And honestly, it's an easier.
Yeah, I don't know much.
To raise a family. My family's been there a really long time, and so.
How far back does your family go in West Virginia?
If you can, that's a great question, but I'm going to say at least the 1760s, okay, and probably a little further as you go, west or east rather, and in Virginia, even like Jamestown, like a really long time. On my father's side, my mom's all Ellis Island. My dad's all.
Well, my dad's actually from the Appalachian region. He's from Virginia proper, from a small little area in the mountains called Hayside. It's really close to the West Virginia, like Kentucky border. I think the biggest town around there is a town called Viers.
Yeah, one of my wife's best friends teaches at Viers at. I know of where you speak.
Yeah,
I spent several years of my childhood living in Virginia, and I love Virginia.
I do too. So it's kind of cool that you got to shoot something there for the Lifetime channel.
Yeah, we have a pretty robust tax credit, a tax incentive, and that Allegheny Image Factory, and we built the company up, and we do everything from commercials and documentaries. We've done TV series. We do a little bit of everything. I just like to work. I like to keep busy. The nice thing about being diversified in what we do is that, when one aspect of the business maybe has a strike or something and shuts down, you have this other thing. And for me as a director and as a writer, it's the chance, it's push-ups. I mean, every time, I don't think anything goes to waste. And even when I'm doing a 30-second commercial, there's something I can take out of that and bring it back to the bigger experience, and frankly, it's just fun to make stuff. I just like making stuff.
Yeah. Like, I'm the same way. Like, I'm not on the level you are. I'm just a small independent filmmaker, but the whole reason I started this podcast realistically was just as a way for me to find a way to be creative when I couldn't get film projects going. Because I like to do things. Like, yeah, I work a day job, but then every day after work, I come home and I work for about 2 hours on other things every single day, whether that be like writing projects or, articles like the one I wrote about Frankenstein and Me, or this podcast, or just trying to get my own stuff going. I don't like sitting still for too long.
Well, and this is actually a really incredible time in that you can actually create things more cost effectively than ever. You can get more people to look at it than ever. You can actually monetize it. There's in a way, there's money in everything now. If it clicks, if it doesn't click, there's not. But you know, if you would have told me 30 years ago that there was money in documentaries, and you know, hell, there's money in TikTok videos. I mean, there's money in all of it. But I said several years ago when I wasn't getting a lot of directing work, and I said to somebody, you know, I no longer make a distinction between a 2-minute and a 2-hour movie. And they said, well, yeah, because you can't get a 2-hour movie. Well, now I can get a 2-hour movie, and I still say the same thing. You know, it's this kind of the wonderful thing about this era is that we have these different platforms, these different methodologies of delivering storytelling, and they're all viable, and they're you know, some stories only need 15 seconds to tell, you know, and some need 15 hours. But, you know, when I was a kid, you know, like in the 70s, you know, making Super 8 films and stuff, it was incredibly expensive to make things. You know, you had to mow a lot of lawns to get enough, you know, money together to buy and develop, you know, 2.5 minutes worth of 8mm or Super 8mm film. And now you with your phone, you know, and you're like, oh.
One thing I'm very fortunate about is the film school that I went to. I went to a film school here in Milwaukee called UWM. They are kind of more of an art film school than anything. Like, you know, you're more likely going to learn about Stan Brakhage there than you will about some of the bigger guys. But up until you pass your portfolio project, so you aren't even a film major until you pass portfolio. You're just a film like major elect. You shoot entirely on 16mm and Bolex cameras. I think for a couple reasons. One, it weeds people out who aren't super serious about it. And then two, it's just to give you an appreciation for where everything came from. And yeah, it was very disheartening the first time I had to buy and this was with a student discount, a $25 roll of film that only got me 3.5 minutes.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
But I'm excited. This is the first interview I've ever been in where somebody name dropped Stan Brakhage. And I've been waiting for Kenneth Anger and Maya Deren and you know, Jack Smith, and we'll have some sort of.
Well, and looking at your credits, you know, not only just your directorial work, but then the things that you've been involved with and produced. Like, granted, if any of this isn't accurate, you can't always trust IMDb, but you worked on Surf Nazis Must Die, which was not a title I expected to see. But then also, you know, you apparently did something with a Misfits selection of music videos. And
yeah, we did we Jason Baker, who was a longtime protege and someone I worked with, he has a makeup effects studio with Tom Savini, but Jason directed and we produced a bunch of videos that then when the Misfits went on tour, it screened behind them, you know, like on a big screen. It was a lot of fun. It was
that sounds super
cool project to do. Yeah, and Jerry only is great. I mean, it was so much fun. So much fun to do.
So you went to film school. Where did you go?
You know, I had a kind of a checkered college career because my first year I went in my hometown trying to rack up liberal arts things on the cheap, Fairmont State, what is now Fairmont State University in West Virginia. Then I went to Point Park University in Pittsburgh for a year, primarily because it was a block from the offices of Questar Magazine and George Romero. And then George and his DP, Mike Gornick, were kind enough to arrange for me to be a PA on Creepshow. And so I dropped out of school for a semester. I did 6 months on Creepshow. And at that point, I remember George said to me, you got to go to LA. You know, if you're really serious, you got to go out there to go to a school. And so I went back to West Virginia for about 1.5 years and took gen eds so that all I had to do, because it was so expensive, you know, to go to LA. And I ended up at Columbia College in Hollywood. I was accepted at SC and UCLA and all that, but I was looking at it going, you know, I'm not a rich kid. You know, I better get some skills that can support me, and I won't have to take a job outside of film. And I got a great education out there, and I was very lucky that I got there. Two good things happened for me. I mean, one was MTV was exploding, and they just needed bodies. There was no work for it. There weren't enough people to make the stuff. So it was one of those times in the industry when suddenly, there was an expansion of opportunity, and I took advantage of that. And then I was friends with legendary filmmaker Fred Olin Ray, and I got to do some lower budgeted films with Fred when he was really getting a lot of traction in his early days. And so, by the time I graduated, in '85, I was pretty far down the road on both tracks, and just had already built, a pretty good network. And it was just timing. It was a good time to be there. And so I was able to parlay that into, a number of opportunities. So including Surf Nazis Must Die, which I did with a bunch of friends from film school, about 4 or 5 months after graduation, I think we did it.
Sometime in the near future, a major earthquake will lay waste to the entire California coastline. From out of the rubble will rise a menace far more terrifying than the death and destruction. Surf Nazis.
Who rules the beaches? Who rules the surfers?
The beautiful beaches, once the crown jewels of California, are now ruled by ruthless gangs. Only one person is powerful enough, daring enough, brave enough to stop them. Only one person can ensure that surf Nazis must die. She's tough.
I want to buy a gun. He's talking like trash, but I'm more interested in something that'll take the head off a honky at 20 pesos.
She's dangerous. She's all woman. She's Leroy's mama. And as long as she's alive, the surf Nazis must die.
You put that together 4 or 5 months after graduating?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's impressive. And I've always loved that movie, honestly. So I actually used to work for Troma. I was an editor for Lloyd Kaufman for about 5 years. I met him, of all places, at the Cannes Film Festival when I was there with one of my films. And I would talk to him often about how much I really loved Surf Nazis Must Die, because I loved it's a movie that, while it's a quote unquote B movie, I just love that I could tell that everyone making it was really in love with cinema, and just the visual references, the way things were shot, didn't feel like it was a run and gun production just thrown together. It felt very deliberate and very in love with not only the exploitation genre, but then with art house films. Maybe I'm overthinking this.
Oh, no. I mean, there were the influences on that process on the director, Peter George, was influenced, among other things. One of the influences was The Long Good Friday. We were all at the time sort of really hot on Once Upon a Time in the West. Like, we were obsessed with it. John McCallum, who wrote, did this amazing score, which finally, came out. Rolling Stone's like, this is one of the best albums of the year. His score is really awesome. And John was, channeling all sorts of stuff, everything from, Vangelis and even Toto and Brian May, what they were doing for Dune, for David Lynch. And so it was, we were certainly had a lot of eclectic, interests. I mean, I remember, I would talk a lot with Craig Colton, who was the editor. And like, I was really into Streets of Fire, Walter Hill's movie, Streets of Fire.
Yeah.
We were trying to play with that, sort of a cool title sequence like that. Sequence, so all of that was, but I think we spent like $185,000. You know what I mean? Like,
the thing that that always sticks with me about that movie is just the use of long lens cinematography, which is something that I learned back when I was in film school. If you can get yourself a good zoom lens, you can make yourself look way more expensive than it is if you just, shoot things farther away.
Cinematographer. I was just reading the Ridley Scott on Duel, on the Napoleon picture.
Mm-hmm.
So the Duelists, his earlier Napoleonic picture, but on the Napoleon movie that he shot the whole thing with 2 zoom lenses, so that he can just reframe on this spot. And I've always been a bit of But we did. We had we rented a big lens. I have a picture of it somewhere because the DP was actually not a kid. He was young, but he was a well-established DP by the name of Rolf Kesterman, who I had at that point, I'd probably done 30 or 40 music videos with Rolfie. And he was just a really great guy and a really good, cinematographer. And he really, like, lenses were a big part of it because so much of it was daylight exterior.
Yeah.
And contrary to popular belief, there is no stock footage in the film. Peter went to Hawaii and shot surfing. I mean, there's nothing in that film that we didn't shoot. But it's the same thing where people are like, it's a Troma movie. No, it's a movie that Troma acquired.
Yeah. And like there is quite a big distinction because, don't get me wrong. I love Lloyd. I love the movies he makes, but the stuff that they acquire there can be such a uniqueness to it. Like, hell, they acquired Christmas Evil, and that's one of the strangest, most in love with art house films I've ever seen that has the trappings of a, Christmas horror film. Right. So I eventually want to get to talking about Frankenstein and Me, and I'm looking at your credits, and like I said, admittedly, I don't know much about your trajectory in filmmaking, but did you want to direct? Like, because I noticed it took a little bit for you to get to directing your first feature film.
Absolutely, and it was a painful. People don't understand. I mean, it is extraordinarily difficult. It was extraordinarily difficult then to get the chance. I think the calculated mistake that I made was I didn't finish my big film in film school. I got real close and it got me a job, and that job got me another job, and that job got me another job. And then I woke up and it was almost 2 years later and I didn't have the resources to finish, but also I had grown in the interim, and now I was like, this isn't really who I am now. I think I think I was just stupid in some parts. My way too much of my self-esteem was tied up in if I didn't direct the movie that I wrote, I didn't. And I had some near misses. I had some stuff almost happen and then didn't happen. I mean, but I knew ultimately that I was going to have to write stuff if it was going to get made. And I was already directing some commercials and things. And that was the other thing. It was difficult to say no to the money. I would say like, no, I don't want to produce any more music videos. And it's like, they put another zero on the check and you're like, oh, well, hell, what's one more, I had written this thing called, that ultimately became Kids at the Round Table. It was a story I came up with in film school, and a Canadian producer wanted to do it, Richard Goudreau, who also did Frankenstein and Me. And they didn't want me. They just wanted the story. And I was like, well, no me, no story. And so
I've had that.
I prevailed. And that's the other thing. And it was very frustrating at the time. I would lose jobs because I wasn't Canadian, or, there were all these different things that, it was not a short straight line. And really, if I have a regret, even though so much of what I've written has actually made it to the screen, is that I wish that I had spent more time early on just focusing on writing. And I didn't. But the notion that you were going to be able to workshop things, was not a very realistic one. And I think sometimes some of the stuff I wrote was, God, it sounds self-serving, and I don't mean it to, but it was just different. I wrote a children's film and no one was really making children's films. People forget that, that if you go back to the early 90s, you are not going to find a plethora of children's films. And in fact, what inspired me to go back to that property and to mess with it was my friend John McCallum and some other friends had done a film for like $60,000 they worked on, shot in Utah, and it blew up on television. I mean, blew up. And they turned around and did another one and it blew up. They were selling, it was just selling all over the country. And I was like, man, people aren't serving this market. It's like, when Ken Burns did the Civil War and they were like, holy shit, people are interested in history And the next thing we had the History Channel. But prior to that, you tell me where you were going to see a long-form, multi-hour documentary on the Civil War. There was nowhere it wasn't going to happen. And people were like, nobody's going to tune into PBS to watch this. And then, of course, which proves William Goldman's famous saying about show business, nobody knows anything, which is incredibly accurate, including me, it was a circuitous route. And I think the biggest person who probably stood in my way was me, because I wanted what I wanted the way that I wanted it. And, I'm not sure there was a shorter way to get there.
Well, it's also interesting too. You mentioned that there was not really a market for kids films, because I'm a bit of a historian when it comes to the world of film, and it comes in waves. They were very popular in the 70s for a little while, of things like the Bad News Bears and all the Bad News Bears clones, and Don Coscarelli cut his teeth making a kids movie. And then they started becoming big in the 80s, but almost in a different way. I almost describe those as family films, where they didn't necessarily, they tried to make something for everyone. And that should always be the goal, but then they did kind of die out. But it's interesting to me that they made such a huge impact on me, because they started, and I'm not going to necessarily say you kicked back open that door necessarily, but from the point of 95 on, they started becoming more common and more popular. And probably some of that was probably because the Disney Channel started doing their original movies and things like that. But I feel like they definitely come in waves. And I also noticed that there's an interesting subsection of people who work both in the horror genre, who also work with kids films.
Interesting. Well, it's Kenny and Company, Coscarelli's picture. In fact, the kid from that worked on Surf Nazis Must Die.
Really?
Yeah, as a grown-up. And I would say that with some films, I was going more for family. Frankenstein and Me was certainly, was a sort of a broader thing. But other films I did, like Believe, they were for, 8, 9, 10-year-olds. In fact, that's one of the things I was disappointed by, the packaging on that particular film, because it made it look like it was some sort of gory horror movie. And it was an entry-level ghost movie for children.
Which movie was this?
It was called Believe. It was with Ben Gazzara and Alicia Cuthbert. It's for children. And they marketed it like it wasn't. And then people were pissed off. And it's like, no, it's for children. Sorry. That's what it was for. And, people say, like, I don't understand. It's like, I believe you. I believe you don't understand. And I understand how you got. But that wasn't my decision. It wasn't. Marketing like that had nothing to do with me.
Yeah. And I think also, like, that's why Frankenstein and Me worked so well for me, because while it was a kids movie in that it was about kids and centered around their problems, even when I rewatched it, unfortunately there's not a good version of it available, and I had to watch it on YouTube. It never feels like it's talking down to the audience. And I believe in our email correspondence we had before this, you told me you were pulling from influences from other countries and the way that they treat their kids' films in other countries. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was heavily influenced as a kid by the CBS Children's Film Festival. Usually it was on, I believe, Sunday afternoons. And they would show foreign films, and they were often far more mature, darker, more nuanced films that often dealt with, some pretty heavy duty topics. That certainly imprinted on me. And I was telling someone, I know of another film that really affected me. There was kind of a TV movie here around 1969 called JT, about, it takes place in New York, and a poor African-American kid. It's Christmas time, and he finds this stray cat and tries to take care of it. And he doesn't have resources. And his mom's like, who's buying all this tuna? Kind of. And it was a somber, nuanced, deep film. And I was a little kid, and it really affected me. So I didn't really understand the rules. I don't think I knew there were rules. I think we were making it up. You know, I mean, in Kids Around Table, there's some cussing, there's some swearing. I didn't know that you couldn't do that. You know, I just was doing it. Frankenstein and Me was never originally intended to be for children. It was originally more of a kind of a Paris, Texas type thing. In fact, the original title, because I hate the title Frankenstein and Me. I mean, I detest it. My working title was Mojave Frankenstein.
Which I love as a title so much.
Yeah, I wanted a more mysterious title. And but originally the guy was a grown-up, and he was kind of I don't want to say a Boo Radley kind of a character, because he wasn't quite that, you know, withdrawn, but he certainly had a Walter Mitty quality. And but we didn't, I had to get the film made. And that was, I had to kind of color inside the lines to do that. And I will say, by the way, going back, I mean, I've been trying to get it restored to DVD. Maybe what people should do is, try to, send messages to Richard Goudreau and Melody Productions, and, and say, like, why can't, this is ridiculous. Why can't this film be out?
So if you don't mind me asking, is it a rights issue? Do the rights holders, are they like holding out? Because I won't lie, I know some people. Like I just, my last episode, I don't know if you know Severin Films, they have David a kids
Gregory,
division.
I would love to put this film out with David Gregory. David, we have talked about this extensively. And we have run into a brick wall, and I love the people that gave me opportunities. I don't know what to do about it anymore. I'm so defeated. And if people want it, I think they're going to have to somehow make it known that they want it. And maybe I don't know, or what I'm not really sure how to get to punch through it. And it's frustrating. Well, it's very frustrating.
I absolutely love this movie. It's no surprise. I wrote a very extensive essay about it, and not a lot has been written about this film because it is so incredibly difficult to see. Like, I think I was bidding on a VHS copy of it recently, because I think VHS was the last time it saw a release.
And I have a laser disc, but one of the fights that I lost, I mean, they just wouldn't listen. But they would not do a 185 transfer of it. They just refused. And I'm like, look, you're really being short-sighted. DVDs are coming. This is where we're going. Spend the money now. You can still do your pan and scan for VHS. And as a result, they did a stupid, 525 lines of resolution transfer, cropped. And the information isn't there. And all of this stuff is in the Cinematheque in Montreal. It's all there. All of the elements are preserved. This is not a heavy lift. But unfortunately, I don't have the rights to do it. And it's extraordinarily frustrating.
That sounds frustrating. And like, I don't know, I have so many questions about this process. So who does own the rights currently, if you don't mind me asking? Do you know? I'm
not entirely sure, to be honest. For
I was
North America,
I was going to try to do some digging.
It is what happened is you had companies buying companies, and I'm just not. I can't.
No, that's fair.
Richard's going to have to answer that, and because I do know that he was trying to get to the bottom of it, and I just don't know if he just couldn't untangle it. I don't know. But you would think at this point it's nearly 30 years. I mean, let's go.
Yeah.
I don't know what we're waiting on.
So was Frankenstein and Me, so I saw it for the first time on television. Was that what it was made for? Was for television, or
No, it wasn't, because Kids Around Table did play in theaters in some countries. And I know this sounds ridiculous, but I don't know, but I think Frankenstein and Me did in some places, not in North America, certainly not in America, in the United States. But also at the time, you know, Disney Channel was kind of emerging, and they just paid a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I was okay with that because I knew I was getting a lot of eyeballs. You know, it was, and especially because I remember that the week that it came out, TV Guide called it a pick of the week or something. It's like, you should really see this film. And so that put even more, you know, attention on it. And, but no, it was just, you know, I don't think the film was handled particularly well, and it was out of my hands and Richard's, you know, once it's been picked up. And, I mean, I found out that it was, at Fanasporto Film Festival in Portugal. I didn't even know that I was invited or that it was in, and I didn't know for almost a year that I won Best Director and didn't even know. And which was, you know, annoying. Yeah. But there was no, you know, I wasn't really no one who was handling sales really cared what I thought.
Well,
and back then I had more of a temper, and I probably fit too many and pissed somebody off, and I don't know.
Well, for a film,
Richard, he was like me. Richard and I went on to do many movies. He's like family. I mean, it's I love him. He created a lot of opportunity for me. But you know, you're not a monarch. You know, you just can't wave your hand and things happen. I mean, it is complicated. In fact, it was probably the only film that I've ever done where at least through delivery, I actually got to exactly do what I wanted to do, was Feast of the Seven Fishes. But, you know, release wise, I certainly would have done things very, very differently. But, you know, nobody knows anything. So.
I just don't feel the same.
You know those chicks that went away to college, the ones we never get to see? Well, they're going to be coming out tonight, and they're going to be horny for the holidays.
That old Christmas magic, huh?
First she jingles the bells, then it's away to the manger, and then it's joy to the world,
like
baby.
a Bing Crosby Christmas special.
I don't want to go and get groped by a bunch of uneducated townies, no.
Thank you.
I didn't mean you.
Oh, well, that's a relief, because I'd hate to be thought of as uneducated.
Beth Claremont, Tony Oliverio.
Hi. Tony, remember this song?
Uh-huh. There it is.
Angelo's your best friend?
Cousin. If he wasn't, there's no way I'd hang out with him.
Oh! You don't knock? In my own house! I put your money looking on you. It's very bad for you.
Think about the feast. On Christmas Eve, in this town, everybody is Italian. Or thinks they are.
What was Juke talking about?
The Feast of the Seven Fishes. It's something we do every Christmas Eve. All the Italians around here do it. We cook fish and we party, and it's a blast.
Well, what I was going to say was, for a film that was not devised to be on television, I think you, combined with your cinematographer, Roxanne DeSanto, did a great job of making sure that everything was TV safe. Because like I said, when I watched it, the version that's on the internet to see still has the Disney Channel commercials on it, which is very funny to me. Like they were pushing the TV premiere of the Goofy movie really hard during the commercials for your movie. And I was actually going to ask, I figured there was, but before you answered it for me, I was going to ask if there was a 1:8:5 version, just because I also wouldn't have been surprised if there wasn't, with how well everything still looks composed in the version that I watched.
Honestly, it's a different film when it's wider.
I bet. Like I could tell by the way you shot it. Well, It even goes back to Surf Nazis. When I first saw Surf Nazis was the Troma DVD, which was just in was in 4:3, and I just like there's a shot in that movie of the actor that plays Mengele, who he's like working on his claw, and it's like it's shot from a distance. There's this great like almost Tony Scott like fog coming through, and I was just like, man, if this was on a widescreen, and it's now available in widescreen, but I kept thinking, like, if this was in widescreen, this would just be a gorgeous looking shot. And with those desert vistas that you shot in Frankenstein and Me, Plus, let's also be real. Burt Reynolds deserves to be seen in widescreen.
Yeah, he was fantastic, and especially when you see it widescreen, you see it on the big screen, and like at one point when he's in the backyard, with the half-finished Hollywood sign, and you can see the tears in his eyes. He was amazing with things like that. And but what's also frustrating is like transfer. A lot of times you hear people say, "Oh, these cheap movies, there's a microphone in the shot, there's a boom, there's this or that." But like with Search Nazis, that reframing, no one bothered to look. There's a mic in there. Yeah, it wasn't framed for full aperture. It wasn't framed for 1/6. You know what I mean? It's slapdash. It just frustrates the hell out of me when.
Yeah, and that would happen a lot on VHS, where they would take, they would, since they knew they were going to be putting in a 4:3 image anyways, they would just take the unmatted version of the film, stick it onto the VHS, and you're seeing all the stuff you're not supposed to be seeing.
Well, it's funny, but that can happen. I remember the first time that I saw John Huston's Fat City, which is one of my favorite films. It's a film that really affected me. But something was wrong in the projection booth, and that opening scene when Stacy Keach comes walking out of this dusty, San Joaquin Valley hotel, and the camera pulls back. And when I first saw it in a film school screening room, you saw the dolly tracks with all the wedges and the apple boxes and everything. And I was like, did John Huston do this just because he was flipping off the audience? It's like, no, this projector wasn't properly, framed up.
That even happened to me when I went to go see the first Thor movie. I went to go see it with a bunch of friends, and that's how I found out that movie wasn't natively shot for scope. They just framed it in 2:3:9:1, because there's a point where this was when the film was still projecting on film. There's a point where whoever was the projectionist must have had it off slightly, because there's a scene where Thor walks into like a pet shop or whatever, and you can see the microphone in a big budget Marvel movie, because the projectionist messed up.
Because now, when I'm directing things, and they'll say, I'll say the boom's in, and people say, "Oh, no, it's out. It's not in." I said, like, if I can see it, I don't want to see it.
Yeah.
Because sooner or later, some idiot will make sure that you see it, and I just don't want anything in the frame that I can't, absolutely know is not going to be there down the road.
Yeah. I'm the same way. Like if I can try to get those things out the shot, you miss things, but that's my philosophy as well. So I also wanted to ask you, like, so Frankenstein and Me came off the tails of your previous film. I'm blanking on the title at the moment.
Kids of the Round Table.
Kids of the Round Table. Thank you. Where did the idea for this film come from? Were you sitting on this idea for a while? Was it a script that you had? Like where did this come from?
I mean, the basic ideas, those fleeting things that pop through your mind. It was, I had, when I first got to the desert, I didn't like it. It was so alien to me. And within 3 or 4 years, that whole narrative flipped, and I became, fanatically in love with the desert. And there were things about it that reminded me of growing up in the Rust Belt areas. You go through, and there were still, standing old mines and ghost towns, and and when I was a kid growing up in West Virginia, and we'd have these old, what were called tipples, these giant old rotting hulks from coal mine operations. And to my child's eyes and mind, they reminded me of Dracula's castle or Frankenstein's laboratory or something, And so I always sort of, was carrying that around, and was certainly heavily influenced, not just by film, but by all of the Marvel horror comic books and black and white magazines. You were constantly playing what if with these famous monsters. And I was with I was on a trip to the Yucatan, to the Quintana Roo, to Tulum back then when there was no electricity and you're like hitchhiking around because there's no services. And we were flying back, and I had to do a connection. in Guadalajara. And I remember as the plane was taking off out of Cancun, I had a flash in my mind of a little kid looking at the monster in a crate out in the desert on his bicycle. I don't know why I had that thought. And by the time I landed in Guadalajara to make the connection, I sort of had a story. But the kid was only in the beginning. And then it was going to deal, once their father died, it was going to, flash forward about 15 years and see how, a lot of it was always intended to be, a meditation on like trauma and loss and, and also, other things that bought me. I mean, I really did have a teacher named Mrs. Perdue who was awful. And, all the French crew loved that her name was Perdue because Perdu in French is lost. But she was a busy work person. She was one of those teachers that would fill the board with busy work and did not want you dreaming or coloring outside the lines. And I deeply resented her. And, I think it's a mistake to discourage children from dreaming.
Yeah.
It was one of my favorite compliments. I remember a really good friend of mine called me after seeing the movie once, and he was like, dude, this film's really subversive. I was like, well, I don't know how subversive it is, but it's a little subversive in that respect because it challenges authority,
It does, and there's just a lot of layers to it. Like I say in my article, it's almost interesting how this film came to me at two very different points in my life. I had very strong memories of it from when I was a child, but those strong memories were like I didn't know what the movie was. I just had images of a Frankenstein's monster in the desert, kids making their own these very primal thoughts, and those had always just stuck with me, especially as I started getting into horror, because I'd ask people like, hey, have you heard of it? What is this movie? Because I didn't remember enough about it to figure it out. It got to the point where I just figured I made it up. And then when I rediscovered it after figuring out what the movie is, it just hit me on this really emotional level. I can't watch your movie without bawling my eyes out. I'll be completely honest with you. And a lot of that's my own personal trauma built around, losing my father. But I think that's why this movie works, is there are so many layers. Like I can tell that it's made by someone who loves the genre of horror because your recreations are so beautifully well executed. And I also it feels like it's got something to say. And I just truly think it's a beautiful movie.
Well, I really appreciate that. And I want to say, having been so heavily influenced by George Romero and being blessed enough to spend a lot of time with him at different times in my life, and particularly in the last couple of years of his life. And I remember saying to him, George, it seemed like your interviews changed as you talked about like Night of the Living Dead. And he said, oh, they did. He said, because people would start reading stuff into it and I would realize, oh my God, blah, blah, blah. I mean, and I think, I just read a book not too long ago and I look like an idiot because I can't remember the title or the author because I'm just overwrought at the moment. It's kind of an obscure thing, but it's a dude who just writes, all he writes about is this one piece of ground that he's been farming or trying to take care of in New England. But he was talking about how imprinted we are on certain things, just make an impression on us and we can't escape. And it usually happens when we're very young, And I think about that, my grandfather had 8mm home movies. Boom. I remembered early on seeing some stuff that I knew was scary and I shouldn't watch, but I was drawn to it. I saw TV commercials for Kiss of the Vampire. And I wanted to see this. I threw an absolute fit that I wasn't allowed to see it. There were things like that. But I look back at the very first few films that I saw in theaters or drive-ins, and I realized how deeply they affected me. First movie I ever saw was the 3 Lives of Thomasina with Patrick McGowan, about this cat who keeps dying and coming back to life, and it's in rural Scotland. But there's a character in the film who's supposed to be a witch. And what you come to find out is she's not a witch at all. She's an herbalist. She's a naturalist, and a lot of my work is defined by I respond to things that feel plausible. I have all the respect in the world for Tim Burton. I'm not a fan of those movies. They don't speak to me because they're too fantastical. I like a more grounded approach. I love Ed Wood, by the way, but gee whiz, it's grounded. It's
my favorite movie of his as well.
I'm not knocking on the clearly a visual genius, and I'll never have a millionth of the success of Tim Burton. I'm not trashing it. I'm just saying, it's like I always say, it's like the beautiful girl at the party that's into you and you're not into her. It happens, and you can't explain why. I'm just not into it. And who was it? I think it was Truffaut. He said we're all either descended from Georges Méliès or the Lumiere brothers. We're either descended from fantasy or from realism. And I think I'm more drawn to realism, in that respect. Although I still like magic and things. It's not that I don't want to have monsters and vampires and King Arthur and all that. But I want them presented to me in a way that I feel is plausible and not cartoonish. And so there was that film. And I'll tell you the next film that just heavily influenced me was To Kill a Mockingbird. Scared me to death. We saw it at the drive-in, and I just loved it. I was just mesmerized, and didn't realize until I read the book years later that actually there is a Frankenstein element in that. It was mentioned early on. In some of the first few pages, they talk about seeing Frankenstein. And then my parents, I don't know what the hell they were thinking. They took us to drive-in, and it was The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, the John Le Carre thing, which is amazing. And damn, another dark picture. And like very grounded, and I was drawn to Le Carre's work because I love James Bond, by the way. I love the Ian Fleming books are amazing. But the Le Carre books blow my mind because he can go 200 pages with no violence, no guns, no nothing. And it's hypnotic. And he dwells on the details. He's just so specific. So, I mean, each of those things, and I agree with what, I think Tarantino said at one point that, when people sit and go, yes, my influences were, Truffaut and this and that. And he's like, no, man, The Dirty Dozen and The Sound of Music. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. That's what imprinted people of our age. Those were things that really meant something, and so, and by the way, Sound of Music has Robert Wise does a sequence in there that's like out of a horror movie. It's very affecting, very, so anyway, I mean, all that stuff just put the zap on my head, to quote Apocalypse Now. And just another thing which really heavily influenced me was that. I just keep going back to the same movies, over and over again that I just can't escape, that always, they just nurture me.
Yeah. So I don't know if you do this, but I know when I'm writing something, writing a script, I need a voice in my head. And a lot of times I'll write it for someone I know or an actor, even if I can never get that person, just to have a voice in my head. So that way, when I'm writing their dialogue, it feels true. When you were writing Frankenstein and Me, did you have a voice in your head for the character of Les Williams? Was it Burt Reynolds? Was it someone else? And how did he become involved in this project?
Well, I mean, certainly it was an amalgam, I think, of the real Burt, but of my dad, who was very encouraging. I was blessed. My father's is gone now, many years. My mother's still living. I was blessed with great parents. I can't lie. They were great. They were educated. They were tolerant, cool people, and they fostered conversation. We talked about things. Then, of course, there were only 3 channels, so we watched things together. And when you watch something that maybe was more adult or uncomfortable, we talked about it. They didn't hide from it. And the mom, that was not meant at all to be my mom, although partly my mom was worried and didn't like the idea. She was way more pragmatic and wasn't crazy about the idea of us going into the movie business. But she wasn't weird and overwrought like in that movie. She didn't really base that,
Yeah.
part of it, quite honestly, was one or two that I might have been romantically involved with who were afraid. It's like, why do you have to go take these risks? And I'm not going to lie to you, I couldn't understand the question. I didn't. I was. One of the things I love about the younger generation is they're not nearly as interested in money as they are in experiences. I was interested in experiences. That was my currency, was experience. And so that, that was affecting. And then Burt was putting his own shade on it. And he was not at the happiest point in his career and related a lot to certain aspects with Les. But the kids, I just tried to sort of remember my friends and me, the way we were when we were kids. I really was a little bit of Earl, not completely. I was a little more, probably well-rounded than Earl, I like to play sports. I played all the sports and, I was always fishing and I was always doing something, but I was always daydreaming too. And I can remember sometimes trying to launch projects with other kids when I was little and getting my feelings hurt when they didn't want to see it through or they didn't understand why, or, you kind of felt like, alone in that respect. Eventually I got into doing fanzines and reading, and developing correspondences with other kids around the country that loved horror and loved comics and science fiction and things, and build a network of people that were really into this stuff. And that, that helped. So I think I was tapping into all of that,
Hey, Earl, Mom's never gonna let us go see that movie. I know.
I went out to Hollywood once, tried to make it in showbiz. It was a long, long time ago. Long time ago. Now that I think about it, well, I had a lot of courage, Go out to Hollywood, some little old town down south. See all them beautiful people, beautiful lights. There's a big old hill up on top. There's a big old sign that says Hollywood. And it just sort of lords over all them people. Now, yeah, I was going to paint my dreams right across the silver screen.
Did you meet anybody famous or work on any movies?
No. No, I quit too soon. I gave up too soon. You got a dream. You got to stick with it. You got to go for it. You can't back off. So make me a promise. You two have a dream. You go for it with everything you got. Right?
Promise, Dad. I promise.
Good night. Good night, Dad. Oh, I was driving my rig through Phoenix yesterday. And this guy in the store, he said, I got a couple things for your two boys. I said, it's impossible. You don't even know my two sons. So he said, no, wait a minute. I got something for them. I said, huh? And this was it. Ta-da! Famous monsters of filmland.
This is great, Dad. Dracula.
Good night.
Look, I hate just about everything I've ever made. So I can just rip the film apart. I'm terrible. I would change some things, I would change certain things I would do differently now, but those were different times, and that I'm not interested. I wish that it just said Frankenstein and Me and the movie started. I wish I didn't have that long. We ran out of money. And so it's a long title sequence over black, because back then you had to have your titles up front. And if I could go back in time, I would not do that. But there you go. I mean, it just is what it is. And I was always sad that we couldn't get more period music. there was a scene in it, where the mom and her friend are driving to work, and the kids have just put on Dark Shadows, which is Dan Curtis was kind enough to give me some Dark Shadows footage, which was really cool. And to hear that music was amazing. But I had that song, Here Comes the Rainy Day Feeling Again. I can't remember which band it was, from the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
That song was on coming through the radio with these two women talking, driving across the desert. It was magical. And I just couldn't do it. I couldn't get it. Back then, you just couldn't buy music. I mean, I have like an incredible list of original songs in Feast of the Seven Fishes, from period 80s music that people like Bob Geldof are really kind and, and gave them to me very reasonably. But back then, like, I wanted the Monster Mash and they wanted $50,000. And it was like, hey, yeah, that's going to happen. And that just wasn't in the cards. But, the whole dynamic of the industry changes. It comes and it goes, and the criteria that I'm not going to go back and try to remake a film or rework a film. I feel like there's something I don't like about that. Even though I know I could fix it and make it much better, I think it would be inappropriate. Other than to call it Mojave Frankenstein, which I would have really liked. I wanted to have the Mojave in neon, you know what I mean, or something.
Oh, that would be perfect.
Yeah.
I also appreciate that you had mentioned that Burt Reynolds wasn't necessarily in the best part of his career at that time. And you look at his filmography, he was kind of in between some bigger stuff, hadn't gotten Boogie Nights yet, which kind of brought him back into the consciousness. But I appreciate that because sometimes you see, these big actors or actors who were once big, who are in smaller parts, and they just don't feel like they give a damn. And I love that Burt felt like he was bringing everything to this part as much as he could give.
Yeah,
maybe I'm wrong, but that's
let's not bring Ben Gazzara into this, because that was my experience, unfortunately, with to get a hero like Ben Gazzara. He worked with Cassavetes, and he told me when he was there first day, I'm here because my wife wants a new family room. But Burt took it extremely seriously and made notes on the script, worked his dialogue, was unbelievably kind and patient with the kids. He and I had our go-rounds, but not for any reason other than you're making a picture. Sometimes things get a little tense. But, I loved him, and I am, it's probably not good for me to sit and really think about how magical my life's been, in spite of some very challenging times. I have a profoundly autistic adult son, who is always going to require care. I lost my father younger than I would have liked. I just was told I wasn't going to direct. I mean, there was a period there I'm like, I may never get to direct a feature again. Like, those are hard things. But generally, in the big picture, insane life, insanely wonderful life. And primarily because I got to spend real time with my heroes, work with my heroes, learn from them, or experience, I'm a huge classic horror fan and Hammer horror movie fan, and got to spend time with Christopher Lee and got a letter from Peter Cushing and many of the actors, writers, and directors of the Hammer films I spent time with. And, I got to do a movie with John Carradine, for God's sake.
Yeah.
I mean, John, I did it with Dave too, but John, out of Frankenstein.
No, that's great. So I got one more question for you before I let you go. So I know you said, in terms of, we've talked quite a bit about, where Frankenstein and Me sits in terms of trying to get it put out. And you also just said that, if given the chance, if you could go back and rework things, you don't know if you necessarily would, other than changing the title. I guess my last big question for you was, if given the opportunity, would you ever consider remaking it? Even if you're just a producer and you find a director or something, like, would you want to revisit that world?
I have another Frankenstein project that I really would like to do.
Mm-hmm.
That has almost been made so many times. I'm so distant from it. If I were to It would be extremely different from that one, and would probably, you know, it would probably be more like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, in kind of a never land of, you know, of, I love the idea of these images clashing. And I want to underscore, I don't think I really made the point completely, but, you know, when you talk about influences, and to me, when Earl Williams, who's named after Earl Williams, the character in His Girl Friday, by the way, because I love that film, is riding his bike and sees this big old you know, silver mining structure. When we look at it, we see this old creosote-soaked wooden structure. When Earl looks at it, he sees Castle Dracula. He sees Victor Frankenstein's laboratory. You know, he doesn't see, his transformation is complete. I would love the opportunity to celebrate the landscape again of the desert for that reason. And I was thinking about it, you know, a couple of years ago, I was directing some commercials on top of the Hoover Dam. I was out in Vegas shooting. And, you know, I had some moments to stand there and kind of look around. And I had shot back in the day a lot at Lake Mead in Vegas. And I was just like, God, I love telling stories in this landscape. You know, it's so existential. It's so incredibly visual. And the more I know about the land and the more I know about the region, the more I think it would inform the work. You know, it'd be really fun to go back. And that part of me, I think it would be really, really fun. I can't imagine anybody asking for that. But yeah, I would do it, but it would be very, very different. It would be, you know, it would be so different as to.
I might be the only one asking for that, honestly.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to ask me for that. You know, a sequel to Seven Fishes, I think, is probably.
Actually, if anything, if I could have anything in this world, would be the opportunity to make a remake myself. But other than that, like, I would love to see more with that film, because I absolutely love it.
See, I think what you're discussing, I think your idea about the book on the island, I think that's in the same, you know, universe. And like, I want to see that film. You know, like that. I'm like, wow, you know what? I mean, that sounds just absolutely marvelous and smart. And I'd be very curious to see where that goes.
Well, if you know any producers who might have interest, let me know. But before I let you go, is there any? I know you're about to start production this week on something new. Are you allowed to talk about it or no?
I really can't. It's I'm producing. You know, we do a lot of things that I'm producing, and it's a TV movie. I can say that I am attached to direct a sequel to October Sky. I've been working with Homer Hickam, who wrote the original source material, The Rocket Boys. And it's a cool project, a West Virginia-centric project, which coincidentally is at Christmas, but it's not really a Christmas movie. And I have some other stuff. I have a couple of things I've written that one of them I think I'm going to probably take a stab now that the strikes are over and go in and pitch it. But I've got two pictures I have to produce back to back. And in the middle of all that, we sold our house and we're moving to our farm, and we have to completely gut the house. And I really want to stay married, so I really got to kind of shepherd this next year is going to be really, really crazy. But I do have a couple of things I want to write, and one of them, if you're a fan of Frankenstein and Me, I think will deeply resonate. And it's not fantastical at all. It's not about Frankenstein. It's nothing like that. But, you know, my friend Tim Lucas, who's, you know, I think one of our greatest living film critics, historians, you know, essayists, and he's a brilliant novelist, by the way. But, you know, Tim looked at a bunch of my work and he's like, you know, your stuff are always about process, about problem solving. And now I just feel like I'm looking over my shoulder all the time about that. I'm like, holy shit, he's right. One of the things I want to write next is very much about teenagers and the creative processes that they pursue. I don't want to say any more than that, but I have something that I really want to sit down and write with that. And I'm also at this point in my career, when I write stuff, I'm writing it for me. And if it gets made, that's great. But I just, I really want to tell that story, and I've just got to carve out some time. And I just haven't had any. I've had so much rewriting to do on other things. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that that's going to happen soon.
Yeah. Well, Robert, I really appreciate you giving me so much of your time in a very busy time in your life. This has been a real treat for me. Thank you very much.
Michael, it was my pleasure. I really appreciated your essay, and maybe we can do it again sometime. You asked very intelligent questions. I appreciate it.
Well, when your next project is about to come out, you can come on and talk about it a little bit.
Sounds great. Thanks a million.
Of course.
The Shameless Picture Show is recorded in Milwaukee, Wisconsin and Easton, Maryland, and is hosted and produced by Nick Richards and Michael Viers. Today's episode was edited by Michael Viers. Our opening theme music was written especially for us by The Directionals, with narration by Zach McClain. The end credit music you're enjoying at the moment was generously provided by my friends in the band 10 Speed. The Shameless graphic design is masterfully done by Amanda Viers. An extra special thank you to all of our Patreon supporters and to our generous sponsors. We are on Spotify, Stitcher Radio, iTunes, Google Play, and Libsyn. You can find links for all these amazing people in the description below.